Travis Wayne Goodsell. The warning message of Scriptures is for you to get out of Babylon. That's the theme of every single prophecy of the latter days. In story form, too. Get out of Babylon. And unfortunately, when you're so caught up in Babylon that you don't recognize it's Babylon, you don't hearken to the warning prophets. And then you end up dead. And so yet again, Mormons get out of Babylon. 17 days left, I believe, was the day today. Get out. Not just out of the church. Get out. Destruction is coming. God himself has warned you. The prophets have all warned you. Joseph Smith has warned you. The Book of Mormon has warned you. I have warned you. If you stay and are destroyed, you are responsible. There is no one else to blame. Except maybe YouTube, the employee. He's giving me grief this morning. He's up to his old tricks again. But there are two more Mormons who have raised their arm to the Covenant Square and said that they will keep the law of sacrifice and die a suicide for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Solo Sild and Brick the Geen. They hide when they attack me, when all they're doing is confessing that they wish to die by the hand of the church whom they've paid the Judas price, paid for by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They got you to pay the Judas price so that you will burn as an oven. So, I was asked a question by one of my following viewers, and so we'll go over that. As I also had a viewer request for the song in the description below, Fire by the Ohio Players. So, because of Ohio and fire, the perfect video would be about the real church history and the rise of the Book of Mormon and thus the church. I've done all this before, but the majority of you are new. I've even published books on this. And I know, you know, that there are other people who've published history books. They don't use science. I use science. Gathering the evidence, developing a theory, testing the theory, establishing facts. None of the other authors do that. For some reason, they didn't get taught. I know one of them has been to BYU. No wonder they weren't taught. And so, we'll have to go over from the beginning with what I went over with the beginning, and we'll summarize it for you. Joseph Smith Sr. in Vermont with his wife and their kids. Their kids are specifically named because of the baby name meanings. It helps to reveal the fact that he knew Jewish Kabbalah. And I would have to go into a full description of that, and I've done the videos of it, but just understand Jewish Kabbalah. It's also very apparent he was in Freemasonry, and specifically the York Rites Freemasonry with the Knights Templar. Friday the 13th, the Holy Grail. This is where he comes from, his background knowledge and information. And so yes, you can see it in the Book of Mormon. And yes, you can see it in the Joseph Smith history account, specifically the second vision. But he never intended of starting his own church. Never intended to have Joseph start his own church. He was living his life as an American citizen, trying to provide for his family and running into some difficulty. And so they eventually moved to Palmyra. I believe it was 1816 when he and Hiram moved. And then the others joined after. And what we read in Joseph Smith's history is not a literal history because of the coding anachronisms that are in it. And so Joseph Smith history is not to be relied on for your knowledge of history. Neither any historian who writes a book claiming they've got it all figured out. And so when Joseph Smith got arrested on the 20th of March, 1826, for glass looking, he had not been visited by any angels. He had not been visited by Emmanuel, both father and son. Yeah, because it's not Jesus, remember? Jewish Kabbalah is not Christian Jesus. You didn't pay attention to what Joseph Smith is talking about, because Willard Richards deceived you by adding in Joseph Smith or Jesus Christ to the name of the church. He was purposely deceiving you. Willard Richards, the one who was with Joseph Smith when Joseph died, was assassinated. Because Willard Richards is the assassin. He shot him in the back. That's according to the forensic evidence. Done the videos. Did it again this year on the anniversary of the assassination. And so in 1818 of May, Smith Sr. was chosen to be a master mason and assigned to the lodge of Canandaigua, New York. There are duties and responsibilities that he has. It's similar to a fraternity, it's similar to a military command. It's similar to priesthood, where there's a fellowship and a duty to protect the flock, and the flock in return helps support you. And that's how they got the Manchester home. Then along came William Morgan. He had gotten himself a house in Batavia, New York, because the press in Batavia had fronted him the money to work on a book that involved the threat to America. And it was about the Illuminati formed by Johann Adam Weishaupt on the 1st of May, 1776. They had branched off, expanded their operation, and had come into the United States. There was threats in 1800, but then the War of 1812. This is when William Morgan claims to have obtained the plot to destroy America in the future. And it involved several attacks along the way. But the big event that they were going to prepare for was 9/11/2023, using the biblical prophecies and star dates given by John in Revelation to coordinate their attack. And as all of Christianity has been blinded by believing it's all literal history and Jesus, they knew that they could hide within the same scriptures. Nobody would know of their plot. And of course they encoded their group with the inverted pentagram of Lucifer. So flags were the main symbol to rally their troops and let others know who they belonged to. And so because of the threat to William Morgan's life, he had to keep it a secret. He had to protect his family. And so he found Joseph Smith Sr. in Canandaigua, New York, and had been working there at the lodge getting the book written. So Joseph Smith Sr. knew all about this. It was his duty as the Master Mason to help his brother, fellow Mason. And on 9/11/1826, they found out that he was working on the book, that he knew their plot. And they had threatened his life, letting him know to stop or he would be murdered, because they had him falsely accused and locked up. He had the money to pay the bail, but yet David Miller of the Batavian Press came out and paid it anyway. And so it was clear his life was in danger. He needed to flee the country. And so Joseph Smith Sr. helped him flee the country. And I won't go into the details behind that. We got to make it as short as possible here for you, because apparently you can't endure it to the end. Though there are a couple of people who do acknowledge that they are. But the majority of you are not. The majority of you don't hearken. The majority of you don't believe. And so you're already gone. You've chosen to die for the church. And so the manuscript pages that were already written also needed to be hidden. But the book still needed to be completed, because this is a national security threat. And they're the only ones who knew about it. And so Joseph Smith Sr. knew of a man named Sidney Rigdon, and knew that he had a book that was unpublished by a man who had died. And so the press in Pittsburgh, Solomon Spaulding manuscript, the press couldn't keep it. They have to throw it away or give it away. The family never claimed it. Apparently they didn't know he had it, because they reveal that they found another one in his steamer trunk when they went through his stuff. And so they apparently didn't know, and therefore couldn't go and retrieve it. But Sidney Rigdon did, because he frequented the Pittsburgh Press on a regular basis, and had a library of his own of books that he would buy and of unpublished books that nobody else wanted. And because of an accident that he had as a younger man, he was not able to give his own sermons for his congregation. And so he required to take from other books, which is why he collected books, to compose his sermons with. And he had a good size following there in his congregation. He wasn't by any means a nobody who struggled to get people to come to church. He had a good sized congregation. You need to understand that. He was a Baptist and had been with Alexander Campbell and his Campbellites, but left the Campbellites because Alexander Campbell refused to do a full revision of the whole Bible to correspond the prophecies with the New Testament. That's what Sidney Rigdon wanted to do. And so Alexander Campbell just redid the New Testament instead. And so because he was now living in Ohio, Joseph Smith Sr. had Oliver Cowdery deliver the manuscripts to him and help him to continue to finish the Book of Mormon, as it became known as. And then, after a year of letting things die down in America, because with that disappearance of William Morgan, there emerged what became a political movement after the anti-Mason riots. A newspaper reporter reported on the conspiracy of the disappearance and of a cover-up by Freemasonry in general. And so the people in the colonies were terrified, and in their mob mentality burned down almost all of the Freemason temples. And so, yeah, to come out and claim that William Morgan's okay, he fled the country, that the manuscript pages are still around and are being finished, no, they can't do that. That's why they couldn't go back to the Batavian Press to ask them to continue to pay for it. It ain't gonna happen. The enemy wants to murder whoever knows about this information. And so Joseph Smith Sr. had to distance himself from it. And so there is no talk by Joseph Smith or any of the early Mormons in his family that would discuss it. That's why they don't discuss him being a Jewish Kabbalist. They just don't want you to know. They have to distance themselves from any clues that would lead to their identity, because they would be murdered. And yeah, Joseph Smith was murdered. Remember, Willard Richards shot him in the back. And so, while Sidney Rigdon is working on the Book of Mormon, nobody knows. So he's got a whole year that he's been working on it, with Oliver Cowdery helping. And in 1827, Joseph Smith Sr. is now wanting to get some kind of a backstory to explain the emergence of the Book of Mormon, because they still can't reveal that it's tied to the 9/11/1826 incident. And so his son is selected for the job. And it's because he had worked for Martin Harris on his farm and knew that he had money that could pay for it. And so Joseph Smith went to him to ask if he would pay for the book. And they had to have a cover story. And thus the Knights Templar with Jewish Kabbalah was implemented by Joseph Jr. to try to convince Martin Harris. But Martin Harris was not that easily persuaded. He wanted to be a part of it. He wanted to see the Egyptian gold treasure plates. And so they had to figure out a way to convince Martin Harris to pay for the Book of Mormon. And thus they had to get him involved in helping. And so Joseph Jr. was living in Harmony, Pennsylvania, north of Pittsburgh. And that's where Emma and her family were, where he stayed. And so when Joseph and Emma eloped, it was to the same courthouse that Joseph Smith got arrested for glass looking, way far away from the family. They were eloping. They didn't want anybody to know. Joseph knew the people in the court. He knew the judge. And so, yeah, it's far, far away. But it was also right in the middle between the farm and Ohio. There was a road connecting. And so Joseph tells us that he, at first, before Martin Harris arrived, was working on copying the characters of the plates. No, it was the original 116 pages that he was busy copying so that he would have something to have Martin Harris work on. And thus why Joseph Smith had the sheet to block Harris's view. Had nothing to do with having actual gold plates. Had nothing to do with Joseph looking at a rock and a hat. Joseph Smith did not dictate any of his own mind to Martin Harris. He had to quote from the text he copied. Because Sidney Rigdon is working on the book. It kind of has to be the same. But then, and so yeah, the whole New York thing, he takes characters to New York, and there's some confusion as the church lied about it, and what the real thing is, it doesn't matter. All of that is a distraction from the real church history. So don't get hung up on that. But yes, Joseph Smith did catch on that it did closely resemble the Isaiah prophecy. It doesn't matter. Then Joseph and Emma's firstborn dies in the summer of 1828. And it's devastating for them. Joseph and Emma try to seek comfort from Emma's religion, the Methodists. And one of the Methodists recognizes that Joseph Smith was arrested as a glass looker. Can't be a member of the Methodists. You need to get out. Because Emma is his wife, she has to go with Joseph. They lost their kid. Now she lost her religion. And because she's the daughter of the Hales had to leave too. So much for the Methodist Church. And so, Section 3 of the Doctrine and Covenants is by Joseph Smith Sr. So you can see he knows about Sidney Rigdon working on the Book of Mormon, but puts Joseph in a timeout because Martin Harris stole the 116 pages because he was on the anti-Mason committee in Palmyra. That was the risk that they took, and Joseph blew it with the distraction of the death of his son. And so Joseph had to be put in a timeout for a year to make sure that that committee doesn't suspect that the original 116 pages exposes who they are, and thus somebody else finding out who they are and then seek to murder. And so this is where Harmony, Susquehanna River, Pennsylvania comes in. It was not called Harmony anymore. It had changed the name several times as I've gone over. There was land there, and Emma's father had land there, and they forged a deed to be a distancing from the situation, in which he was selling land to Joseph and Emma so that Joseph could build a home there. And it was a payment of $2,000, the payment price for the printing of the book. How did Joseph get the money? He had to get Martin Harris to pay for it because he didn't have the money. There was no exchange of payment. It was Emma Hale's father that took them in and had them have a home built for them as well. All during that year while they were in hiding. And so yes, it's right below where the courthouse was, where Joseph was arrested as a glass looker and Joseph and Emma eloped. And so this was a perfect transition because they could write Harmony in his documents, and Martin Harris would look over that and just, yeah, it was Harmony. He wouldn't, yeah, it was a plausible deniability. And so this is the time where Sidney Rigdon, having an extra year now, is writing the parts where Moroni says, "I've got some time, I'm still alive. Here's some of the letters of my father. I'm still alive. Here's the abridgment of the plates of ether. I'm still alive. I'm going to finish up the record." And then we see section 4, "A marvelous work and a wonder is about to come forth among the children of men." 1829. At the beginning of the year. Is it January or February? Let's check on that real quick. February. And so section 10 is incorrect in our current publications. See, February, marvelous work and wonder is about to come forth among the children of men. Joseph is still on timeout. He's not allowed to touch the Urim and Thummim yet. And to use it, it won't work for him. And then in the summer of 1829, confirmed by the Joseph Smith papers, that's why it's in this order, Bruce R. McConkie is deceiving you. And so, a year later, after everything has died down, they find out that Martin Harris did not reveal anything. Nobody suspected anything. And so it was safe again to go to Martin Harris and say, hey, you were kind of an evil man, stealing the 116 pages, but we've got it almost finished now. Will you pay for it? Okay, I'm sorry. I want to be a part of it. I want to see them. Yeah. They use guilt to get him to pay for it now. After all, he is an evil man. He stole them. And he doesn't understand the national security implications of the Book of Mormon. And so, they again create a cover story that it's the Book of Lehi that was the missing plates, and so now it's the small plates of Nephi, and that are put directly in up to the words of Mormon. And so when you see this, it's still Joseph Smith Sr. talking to Joseph Smith. And so because of the need to rewrite the 116 pages, instead of having Sidney Rigdon go back and rewrite it, Joseph Sr. had Sidney Rigdon just continue on from where he was going. And Sr. took the responsibility as the Master Mason to rewrite the 116 pages. That's why there is Jewish Kabbalah and Knights Templar symbolism in the 116 pages. Just so let you know. And so then the dating of all of this, as Joseph does in his 1838 version, is specifically patterned after the prophecies. Because second vision, he's quoting prophecies of the latter days, and specifically having viewers in the times and seasons study their Bible and the Book of Mormon. Because the second vision of Lehi is the second vision of Joseph Smith. The second vision of Nephi is the Joseph Smith history, the first and second vision. The Great and Abominable Church, the first vision tells us who the Great and Abominable Church is. The second vision of Nephi, about the Great and Abominable Church, right there in chapter 13. And all about the scriptures. And so, even though it's Christianity, what does Brigham Young do? Yeah. He goes around telling everybody it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that the Book of Mormon is another testament of Jesus Christ, that Joseph Smith is Christian. The Great and Abominable Church. Because they are the enemy that are plotting to overthrow our government in the latter days, and had infiltrated the church, rose up in number, rose up in popularity and authority, as he couped the church in 1838. Took it over, framed Joseph for what his Danites did. And Joseph Smith got out. And so the coup didn't go through, which is a pattern for the latter days. Hint, hint. So, there you have it. That's the origin of the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, and why it is what it is, and the warning message of a national security threat on 9/11. And it's not just Utah. It's New York, as John Taylor's vision also confirms, and others to mask their intentions here. And so, yeah, I'm suspecting Georgia to be one of the targets. I'm not sure if Florida and Texas would also, but DC obviously would also be target. And so, yeah, I don't know if other locations would be selected as part of this, but yeah, it'll be a full-on attack on America. They have to destroy the government, and the Book of Mormon tells us this is what's going to happen. So hang on, get out of Babylon.